I start, I want to say thanks to my parents who came all the way from South Korea to be here. My parents who took care of me for 4 years. If my life story were a book, it would begin with once upon a time in a land far, far away. You're not even a Korean, you're an American. I flashback to hearing this phrase almost every time I disclose my plan for summer in Korea to any American friends. And almost time I heard it, I responded with a lighthearted smile and a moderate laugh. Even though the phrase does not seem significant, for me, it contains a very powerful meaning. It's a phrase that identifies me as one of them, a phrase that exemplifies my success in fitting in, a phrase that represents overcoming the conflicts in my life. Chapter 1, Man vs. Self. My story begins with a 13-year-old skinny Asian exchange student hopping on an airplane to cross the Pacific Ocean for his new journey. Although many of you think I have been the way I am now, the first chapter of my story was chaotic. Living a cozy and serene home as a 13-year-old boy to live a completely different life in a completely different place with only rudimentary English, anxiety was by far the most prevailing emotion. I remember when I first stepped into Miss Law's classroom with my red hair hanging below my eyes. Clay Davis and Casey Wilmsmeyer were staring at me like if they saw an elephant at a circus. The moment my eyes and Casey's eyes met, I suddenly froze. Different complexion, different language, different everything, except red hair. Although she did start a well-meaning conversation by, I like your red hair, panic and paranoia foreshadowed the seemingly never-ending obstacles I had to overcome. Chapter 2, Man vs. Man, or Koreans versus Americans. The second chapter of my story begins with my struggling with the English language in Ms. Walter's language arts class. After a couple weeks of school, I moderately acclimated to the atmosphere and learned some lessons such as saying good morning or how are you in the hallway when you pass someone. But conversation was still too difficult for me. Once Bailey Wharton approached me and asked what my favorite American candy was. Not knowing how to respond to her question and not knowing how to get the conversation going, I said, Skittles. And the conversation ended. She still thinks my favorite candy is Skittles, and she just brought me 5 packs of Skittles before the question started. But the fact is that the only reason Skittles was the future valedictorian's favorite candy was that Jack Gilbert was in England before class started. Episodes just like the Skittles incident continued for weeks and months. Once I was at the Paulsons for a dinner, and almost the same incident occurred. While we were all eating, Jake Paulson asked me if I were to be the valedictorian, because I did not know what the word meant, and because I was taking Latin, and valid meant goodbye, and dick meant sass, I said, no, I don't want to say goodbye. Jake started laughing so hard that he almost broke his lips. Chapter 3, Man vs. Society. My third chapter begins with a new host family, the Great Mann household. Fortunately, the conflicts in the first 2 chapters gradually mitigated. Yearning for interactions with people was solved with Larkin and Mr. Mann, who brought so many groups of people in my life. Family friends, friends from school, friends from church, customers, and largest of all, their cousins. My yearning for normal conversations was solved with all the interactions I had with the Mann's network. But a new type of conflict arose, Man versus Society. Although I had been living in the United States for about a year when I moved into the Man's, such experience was not able to fill up the 6,000-mile gap between Korea and America. What I cared for was different, what I laughed at was different, what I valued was different. And everything was different. I remember the first formal dance I attended, junior year prom. The dance was spectacular. When you roll into the dance floor with a marvelous day like summer sparks, you cannot expect a mediocre dance. The irony in my story, however, started on the way back to Jenna Finnison's for Waffle House. In the car were Brad Hickman and I, and he started a conversation about how great the dance was, how comical it was, and people started to whip. In addition to the fact that dances are not tradition, the fact that a funky dance move like the whip, the dab, were entertaining surprised me. To someone all the way across the Pacific Ocean, where its lifestyle is considered as exotic as one in Mars, some cultural practices just did not make sense. Chapter 4, Man versus Society continues. The fourth chapter of my story begins with my dealing with the culture within Christian Academy. Cal was very unique as compared to two other American schools I had gone in Maryland. There were some who belittled those with different values or different identities. Although I did not get offended by any of these references anymore, I struggled accepting jokes about my racial identity. Those well-meaning jokes like Jonathan Cheek giving me a nickname called Big Sush. Were people assuming I'm a math genius just because I'm an Asian. Although I did get the perfect score in AP Calculus. Those jokes are very silly and just amusing. But when you're exposed to even innocuous jokes for years, it wasn't just silly or amusing. It was onerous, and sometimes it hurt. Because of my reputation of seemingly openness and invulnerability, I felt as if I was required to endure them. I'm not trying to denounce anyone. I know that I left with them when the joke came out, but surely it was the most difficult conflict of my story. Chapter 5, Climax and Resolution. The last and the most significant chapter of my story has a very clear tone shift. All the previous chapters and the conflicts of man versus self, man versus man, man versus society led to this climax and the fall of protagonist, me. After years of enduring and fighting the struggles, I became very depressed. Even though conflicts seemed to be alleviated, they had actually slowly consumed me. I cannot forget all the dark nights I spent sniveling and blaming both God and my mom for putting me in such circumstances. Almost every weekend for at least 3 months, I called her, entreating for relief and to allow me to return to Korea. Although she did always respond with gentle and warm-hearted encouragement, with the emphasis on the presence of God and His purpose for me, none of her supportive and kind words were able to change me. But ironically, what changed me was her harsh criticism of my cynical attitude. She reminded me how weak and ignorant I was. She reminded me how blind I was. And she reminded me of all the blessings in my life. Until my mom corrected my view, I was very depressed and wasn't able to figure out what's going on. And I realized that I was in one of the best host families in America, the Manns, and was going to one of the greatest schools in Kentucky with probably the best group of people I will ever meet. I will probably never experience all those poker nights with Larkin, Jonathan, Ben, Tanner, Cal, Benton, David, Derek, Alex, Paul, Chandler, and so many other guys. I will probably never be able to sneak out at 3 in the morning, tramped up in Jonathan's car with 7 other guys for Waffle House. I will probably never have such welcoming groups of people like the Embry twins and Connor Duffy, who call me a brother, even though we don't have anything similar. After hearing my mom's first harsh words, my tone completely changed, and my story resolved with the protagonist learning how to appreciate and living happily ever after. Yes, my story's ending and resolution are very mundane. It doesn't have the excitement of a story like Dylan Sexton's, where his car flew into a tree and he survived. It doesn't have the poignancy of a story like bread, which he shared in chapel. But nothing in great literature happens by accident. The theme of my story is that sometimes when we're constantly burdened by struggles, we just long for a marvelous and extraordinary hero or event to rescue us. But realizing that the ultimate author of any story is God can be as simple as having a 2-hour religious talk with Cody Morton in Cal's basement after a football game with Tanner Kallenhauer screaming at you to be quiet. As Leo Tolstoy puts in his novel Anna Karenina, if you look for perfection, you'll never be content. Or, as an old Korean proverb says, "호시우보 우보천리," which means if you see like a tiger and walk and endure like a cow, you can walk 1,000 miles. What I am trying to say tonight is that we're all living a place we call at home. To start a new journey where you will be an alien or you will be an outsider. Some of us will be depressed with loneliness. Some of us will be mocked for who we are. Some of us will be persecuted for what we believe in. And we are going to start our new story, our sequels to high school. We do not know how many or what kind of conflicts will be in the book. But when your protagonist is at the climax with overwhelming stress and chaos, don't forget that the path leading to your climax does not have to be extraordinary and miraculous. All it takes to reach your resolution is a simple truth as remembering who the ultimate author is, God, and that He is the author and finisher of our books. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to invite our superintendent, Mr. Tim Greener, to the podium. Mr. Greener, I affirm that these candidates have all met the academic requirements set forth by the Commonwealth